The Illinois Accountability Commission will now come to order. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patricia Brown Holmes. I am a vice chair of the Illinois Accountability Commission, and I welcome you to our fourth public hearing. For 64 days last fall, the federal government occupied an American city. Not in wartime, not after a disaster, but in peacetime, on ordinary streets, in ordinary neighborhoods. Masked agents in military gear roamed our communities. They abducted people, they searched them, they tear gassed them, they beat them, they shot them, and afterwards they blamed the victims, calling them domestic terrorists. They arrested and charged them with crimes and then dismissed the cases. This is not hyperbole. This is the evidence. This was Operation Midway Blitz.
Signals that he'll soon send troops and ICE agents to the city as part of his crackdown on crime and illegal immigration.
The Department of Homeland Security announcing Operation Midway Blitz on September 8th.
It's a war from within. I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military.
I got no heart, for real. No heart. No heart.
Everything they do has been exemplary.
We are focused on the worst of the worst.
This is what ICE does. This is what these terrorists do to babies.
Mama, you okay, Mama? You okay? You all right?
It was scary because I've never had a gun put in my face. They asked my name and my date of birth and asked me did I have any warrants, and I told them no.
She said she was then handcuffed and released around 3 a.m.
No! He's not doing anything! He's not doing anything! He's a citizen! He's a citizen!
I just want my baby back. He's not an immigrant. He was born and raised in Chicago.
And they pulled him under the truck, put him in a chokehold, and they started repeatedly punching him in the face. You can see in the video, he's struggling to breathe.
Have some of these raids gone too far?
No, I think they haven't gone far enough.
Do you have papers? My name is Denise, but I got my United States citizen! Get back!
We're under siege. We're being invaded.
Get back, I will shoot you! You're gonna what? You're gonna
I believe that all uses of force that I've seen and all arrests that I've seen have been more than exemplary.
For these abuses across our state and across this country, the federal government has consistently failed to deliver accountability, and culpable agents are still roaming our streets. The Illinois Accountability Commission was created to fill this accountability void, to catalog what happened, to investigate the truth, and to demand justice for the people of Illinois. One such Illinoisan is a young woman by the name of Katie Abram. Katie tragically lost her life to a drunk driver on January 19th, 2025. The driver happened to be undocumented, a fact this administration seized on to politicize Katie's death. On September 8th, 2025, the Department of Homeland Security announced in a press release that it was dedicating Operation Midway Blitz to Katie. But Katie did not, of course, choose to attach her memory to an assault on a city that she loved. So I'd like to now invite her mother, Denise Lawrence, to speak to Katie's memory and the impact this has had on her family.
Thank you, Judge Holmes, for the introduction, and thank you to the entire commission for having me today. I would also like to acknowledge the other individuals testifying over the next 2 days for their bravery in sharing their stories. Thankfully, my family was not physically impacted by Operation Midway Blitz, but I wouldn't wish the emotional turmoil that I've experienced on anyone. My name is Denise Lawrence. My daughter is Katie Abraham.
Ms. Lawrence, I want to express the sincere condolences of this entire commission. Thank you for having the courage to share your story with us.
She was 20 years old in January 2025 when her life was tragically cut short in Urbana, Illinois, by a drunk driver who happened to be undocumented and here illegally. You may have heard her name, not for the compassionate, caring person that she was, not because of her beautiful empathy, not because she was a devoted friend and a beloved daughter. You've probably heard her name because Operation Midway Blitz was named in her honor by the Trump administration. And we just saw that video. It was dark, it was difficult to watch, and this is what Katie is associated with. This is what my family has been dragged into. Losing Katie was shocking, and it was overwhelmingly horrifying. And any of us who has lost a loved one knows the pain of grief. Anyone who loses a loved one suddenly knows that that grief is mixed with other types of indescribable, intense emotions and a new level of pain that's been brought on by the sudden loss. It's a waking nightmare to know I'll never see one of my favorite people ever again. And I learned that the Trump administration was using my daughter's name for their political agenda when friends reached out after seeing it on the news. And I just briefly described the pain of losing my child, and having my daughter's name used this way, it added a level of despair I didn't even know could exist. My heart just sank. I had a flash of such devastating emotion, and some of you may have experienced that kind. It's the kind that's so overwhelming that your body is just fighting to process it, and the room sounds like it's underwater. Everything around you seems to stop in time. It was that rush of adrenaline as my body and brain were fighting to understand. And then part of the propaganda was the Department of Homeland Security. It was like they seemed to know that they should name Operation Midway Blitz in honor of somebody. It's like they knew. And they used my daughter Katie's name in an attempt to give them cover for their disturbing tactics. And now they say, this is our why, with images of Katie on social media, to try to justify the wrongdoings of the operation. But they're not using the trend correctly, because their why is for their political agenda. It's not for her. And it was clear from the beginning that there's nothing honorable about Operation Midway Blitz. Trump's agents were wearing masks to obscure their identity, and they took to the streets with no regard to the impact that their actions might have on families, including mine. They preyed on vulnerable communities, and they preyed on Katie, who had no say in the matter. Having my daughter's legacy associated with this violent government operation and their political agenda, instead of the light and positivity that she contributed to this world, is inexcusable, and she would have wanted nothing to do with it. You know, it would have been one thing if the use of Katie's name stopped after Operation Midway Blitz. was bad enough. But the Trump administration is still using her name to this day. In the past year alone, the DHS and ICE have used my daughter's name and image on Twitter dozens of times. And some of the most powerful people and organizations in the world have done the same, including President Trump, Kristi Noem, Elon Musk, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, the Republican National Committee, and countless GOP politicians who are supposed to be representing me. They've used it, and they're right here in Illinois. And they didn't even know her. They're not using her name in an honorable way, remembering her for the insightful, outgoing, compassionate, caring, witty, music-loving, fun person that she was. They're using her name only for their political gain. And it's wrong, and I've had enough. At this point, some of you might be asking, didn't her father agree to this? And I'd like to ask any of you in the room who are parents, how would you feel if a major decision about your child was made without your input? How would you feel? Now, I'll never fault anyone for how they grieve or if they want to get behind a cause because they feel strongly about it. But if that crusade involves your child, I think you'd agree it's wrong for your child's name to be involved without both parents' input. So I fault the Trump administration for not even picking up the phone to ask me, not only an American that the Trump administration should be representing, but I'm Katie's mother. I've already talked about the heart-stopping moment when I found out about the use of Katie's name along with this operation. The stress, the disgust, the unsettled emotions that I feel from her name and photo being used for their political agenda, I think it's obvious I still feel it today. But to make it even more disturbing, the Trump administration not only never contacted me, they have erased me as Katie's mother. They're framing another person as her mother to lead people to believe that both Katie's parents were on board with this atrocity. What other administration would do something like that? I would now like to discuss actual facts about crime. Operation Midway Blitz was framed as targeting the worst of the worst, undocumented people who were here illegally and committed crimes. And if you believe the spin, Katie was killed by a drunk person who fits that profile. And I can see where it could be easy to get caught up in that thought process, but don't let them fool you. Take it from someone who lost my daughter to a crime. And I want to be clear, the crime was drunk driving. There were 288 drunk driving fatalities in Illinois the year Katie was killed. And do you know how many of them were the fault of US citizens? 283. Let that sink in. Based on media reports, 5 deaths, 5, were likely attributable to undocumented individuals. So by saying that, if you believe that spin, saying that you're only interested in that 5, you're saying that the 283 others that were killed by drunk drivers that were US citizens, that was okay. And it's not okay. All 288 matter, not just 5, not just 1, not just Katie. So if Trump was interested in being tough on crime, and he's going after the worst of the worst, he should be fighting drunk driving. Around 10,000 Americans are killed annually by drunk drivers, the vast majority of whom are fellow Americans. And as a society, we should be asking ourselves why it's only newsworthy if an undocumented person was at the wheel. It's because Trump made it that way. So we know this has never been about crime. As this committee has outlined in detail, he's sent his agents here to be rough on people and separate families. And if he cared about crime, he also wouldn't have pardoned his January 6th rioters, 5 of whom who were arrested or charged with a DUI, and 2 of them killed people while driving drunk. So Operation Midway Blitz was never about dangerous crimes. It was about creating fear among communities and dividing people. I can say with confidence, Katie would have hated it. And she would have hated having her name continuing to be used by politicians publicly and on social media. The Trump administration preyed on her name and used it in a vile way. Katie Abraham was a genuinely empathetic and caring person that all of us who love her miss her every single day. And hearing our pain should be enough for anyone to stop recklessly using her name for the convenience of their political agenda. Her death should not serve as fuel and cover for the Trump administration's political agenda. Katie Abraham was my daughter, and she was one of 288 people in Illinois who was killed by a drunk driver in 2025. I want her to rest in peace with the 287 others who lost their lives in the same tragic way. Katie's loved ones deserve to grieve and process her loss in a healthy and private way, and the persistent use of her name for political gain prevents us from doing that. And I don't expect the Trump administration to care, but I do think it's time for them to move on from her name and fight the real crimes that persist in our country. It's time to finally let Katie rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Lawrence. Your bravery and courage in being here is appreciated. Our sincerest condolences. We're here in the same spirit to share the story of Operation Midway Blitz. What you are about to witness over the next 2 days is a reckoning built on evidence, body-worn camera footage, bystander videos, law enforcement records, court filings, and the first-hand and recorded accounts of people whose lives were shattered by this operation. The Illinois Accountability Commission exists to do what no other body has yet done: gather evidence of federal misconduct, examine it rigorously, and present it to you to judge for yourself what happened in America's heartland. The founders built this country on a simple principle that government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. Our federal government violated that consent by occupying neighborhoods and trampling on our rights during Operation Midway Blitz. And over the course of today and tomorrow's hearings, this commission will present the evidence to prove it. Before we begin, please be advised that this hearing will include images, testimony, and public comment that may be graphic, profane, and difficult to witness or hear. Please take care of yourself and step outside if needed. I will now turn it over to Lead Commission Counsel Ahmed Bassett to provide an overview of the evidence we will be presenting.
Thank you, Commissioner Holmes. The federal government is responsible for investigating alleged misconduct by federal agents, but this administration has abandoned that responsibility, and along with it, our founding principle that we are a nation of laws, not men. So this commission did what no one else would. We built a record of evidence that you, the public, can now judge for yourselves. This is a durable record, and it exists because of the people of Illinois. People who grabbed their whistles and raised their cell phones, who filed lawsuits, produced investigative journalism, and posted what they saw to their social media feeds, who bore witness, even when they didn't feel safe. The commission also heard from people who could not fully participate in these public hearings. While many of them wanted to publicly testify, their fears of reliving trauma and of retaliation by the federal government were just too real, especially in immigrant communities. These fears were palpable. Even so, their accounts were incorporated into the record wherever possible. But let the record also reflect that the absence of their full voices from this room is itself part of the harm we are documenting. Now, in total, the record is composed of 16 in-depth investigations conducted by commission staff. It includes nearly 60 interviews and hundreds of hours of reviewed video footage, some of it never seen before. The geographic scope of the commission's work is reflected in the various dots on this map. Now, keep in mind that each dot is more than just an investigation. It is a community transformed, families destroyed in an instant, people tear gassed, shot at, beaten. The violence was often indiscriminate. You could have been a 1-year-old child in a car seat or a Chicago police officer. It made no difference. What mattered to those federal agents, most of whom weren't even from around here, was whether you looked like you belonged or needed to learn a lesson for daring to protest their actions, or just in the way, in which case you were at their mercy. This collective violence was not simply improvised on the field. It was greenlit in Washington, D.C., and it was executed through 3 specific directives that we will focus on over the next 2 hearings. The first directive was to militarize our streets. The year 2025 saw weapons spending for federal immigration agents surge by 600%. Roving patrols expanded, and agents were newly authorized to rove near schools, hospitals, government buildings, and other sensitive locations that had been off limits for more than a decade. You will see this directive in action in Little Village, where Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino roamed the streets, tossing tear gas canisters and lying about it. And in Lakeview, where agents pulled day laborers from ladders and gassed the neighborhood. The second directive was to suppress lawful dissent. The message to agents from the top was explicit: to go hard and to hammer dissenters. Not surprisingly, tear gas use became knee-jerk. Pepper balls were used to send a message, and the objective was obvious: to make the cost of bearing witness too high. You will see this in Old Irving Park, where a neighborhood was doused in tear gas after residents protested the beating of a 67-year-old neighbor driving home from a run. And in Evanston, where agents unleashed violence on people who dared to show up at the scene of a crash that agents caused and lied about. The third directive was to immunize lawlessness. Agents were told falsely by senior administration officials that they had full immunity when enforcing immigration laws. Basic safeguards, like requiring agents to obtain a judicial warrant before entering a home, were scrapped. And a cardinal training principle to value the sanctity of life above all else was de-emphasized. You will see the third directive play out in the east side of Chicago, where agents ignored direct orders to terminate an 18-minute-long high-speed car chase through a neighborhood. And in Brighton Park, where Commander Bovino sent a congratulatory email to the agent who shot Marimar Martinez before she even left the hospital. 3 directives: militarize our streets, suppress dissent, and immunize lawlessness. The administration justified them as necessary to get the worst of the worst. But about 4 out of every 5 people arrested during Midway Blitz had no criminal record, and that share only grew as the operation continued. Now let's be clear, the federal government can enforce immigration laws, but not through a violent dragnet, an approach federal judges across the country have roundly denounced as unconstitutional. In Chicago, Judge Sarah Ellis described Operation Midway Blitz as shocking to the conscience. But as these warnings piled up, the paramilitary operation pressed on. And it was especially felt here in Chicago. Just as agents were flooding the city's streets last fall, Trump made this alarming post on Truth Social. I love the smell of deportations in the morning. Chicago about to find out why it's called the Department of War. As University of Chicago professor Robert Pape explained at the commission's second hearing, Chicago has become the primary testing ground for a new model of federal power, one that blurs the line between law enforcement and political control. One of the commission's central tasks was understanding who was responsible for creating this new model. So let's start at the very top. The buck stops with President Trump. After retaking office, Trump openly suggested using cities like Chicago as training grounds for our military to confront what he described as an invasion from within. This wasn't a stray remark. It signaled a governing approach, and the person tasked with carrying it out was Stephen Miller. In May of last year, Miller personally directed DHS leadership to make 3,000 immigration arrests a day. He received daily updates on whether those numbers were being met. And when agents focused on arresting people with criminal records, he reportedly snapped, "What do you mean you're going after criminals? Why aren't you at Home Depot? Why aren't you at 7-Eleven? But what drives Miller is not just ambition, it is ideology, one rooted in the nativist belief that the only good immigrant is a deported immigrant. Even Trump has reportedly joked, "Stephen, if you had your way, everyone would look like you." Miller's apparent reply, "That's correct." Over the next 2 days, you will hear the names of the officials who executed Miller's vision, the mouthpieces who normalized it, and the law enforcement veterans who let it happen. But I want to focus on one official in particular, the person most critical to executing Miller's vision on the ground, Gregory Bovino. A 30-year Border Patrol veteran, in 2025, Bovino was elevated from his mid-level post as Chief Patrol Agent for the El Centro sector of Southern California to a newly created national position, Commander at Large. Under his prior command, El Centro agents used force versus being assaulted at more than double the agency-wide rate. The American Prospect reported that a willingness of El Centro agents to pursue a militaristic shock and awe campaign was a big reason they were handpicked for Operation Midway Blitz. And like Miller, Bovino was also driven by an anti-immigrant animus. On a podcast in November of 2025, he said the following.
When we talk about shutting those illegal alien-based economies down, just like we did in Charlotte, Los Angeles, Chicago, what happens when they get shut down long enough, Gil? Well, you know what? Maybe it's time that several million more, and there's already been 2 million that have self-deported, that have left the country.
That is who set the tone for the hundreds of militarized agents who rampaged across Chicagoland last fall. Bovino and his chain of command owe the public answers. That's why the commission invited them to testify at these hearings. And every single one of them declined to be here. So we analyzed their statements, their conduct, and the operations they ran. And you will see the impact of their decisions in the presentations that will now follow. I'll turn it over to Commission Counsel Karen Sheely, who will now detail the first directive, how our streets became militarized.
The Trump administration made good on its threat to militarize our streets. It unleashed masked, often unidentified federal agents wearing camouflage into the neighborhoods of Chicago. These agents included Custom and Border Patrol agents who have a long history of using excessive force and who have no training in an urban setting. Throughout the fall, helicopters flew above usually peaceful neighborhoods. Caravans of armed federal agents poured through residential and commercial corridors without respect for schools and other sensitive locations. And these federal agents used excessive force against arrestees and residents alike. Today, you'll hear about the impact of these military-style actions in 3 neighborhoods: South Shore, Little Village, and Lakeview. There's perhaps no more dramatic example of the use of military tactics than the September 30th, 2025 raid on a South Shore apartment building. In the pre-dawn hours, over 300 agents surrounded the apartment complex in armored trucks, unmarked vans, and a Black Hawk helicopter. The federal agents stormed hallways using flashbang grenades, military-style rifles, and battering rams to break down doors. The federal government didn't hide these tactics. It was exactly what it wanted the public to see: an extraordinary show of force bearing down on Chicago. Commander Bovino himself oversaw the operation. In the following clip, you'll see how the federal government publicized that raid on social media with the help from a film crew and drones recording sweeping footage of the scene. The raid was conducted with extreme militarized force, and the federal government publicized it as a successful anti-crime operation. DHS claims that the raid was a targeted operation that arrested, among others, Trinidad Aragua gang members and violent criminals. But these claims have not been substantiated. Federal prosecutors have not filed criminal charges, and reporters investigating the event have not found evidence that the residents belonged to the Trinidad Aragua gang. Nor has DHS offered any evidence of that to the public. What the DHS propaganda video did not show you was that federal agents were seen by neighbors detaining families and children and parading them outside the building, some barely closed. United States citizens were detained for hours before being allowed to return to the building where their apartment units had been upended. We'll now turn to Little Village, the vibrant home to a large Latino population, which endured a relentless surveillance and arrest campaign from October until December. Bovino and his crew returned to Little Village day after day, occupying the neighborhood and unleashing violence on the people who live and work there. Many of the violent events that the commission has uncovered began when armed, masked federal agents stopped people on the streets and questioned them about their citizenship, based solely on their race or occupation. Just as Midway Blitz began, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh endorsed the practice as, quote, common sense, and argued that the people who are not deportable, quote, will be free to go after the brief encounter, end quote. These stops have come to be known as Kavanaugh stops. You'll now see a video highlighting one of the most violent and dramatic days of the military-style occupation of Little Village, and it begins with Kavanaugh stops. As a reminder, these videos contain graphic language and images.
What country are you a citizen of? Are you a citizen? Stop the car, damn! ¿De qué país nació? You don't step back or you touch a vehicle.
Oh, no, y'all took my dad.
Stay back up. Run it.
Bovino and his crew returned to Little Village day after day. This is only one example. I want to note that in other investigations, we'll be able to present the testimony of people at the scene of the events. Despite extensive outreach in Little Village, some individuals did not want to appear in this forum, and understandably so, given the months-long demonstration of federal power unleashed on their neighborhood. They did want to share their stories in other ways, and did so, including in closed sessions. These military-style attacks also had a devastating impact on people's livelihood. You'll now hear from some of the Little Village vendors impacted by this reign of terror.
We are Carnicería y Taquería Aguascalientes. We started as a butcher shop and grocery store, and then we opened a taqueria a few years later.
My parents actually have a business here since 2005, so as long as I can remember, I have memories coming right after kindergarten.
26th Street was just full of agents everywhere. It looked like a war zone out here. I don't think there's a better way to describe it other than a war zone. That was when they were still using the tear gas, and so it was absolute chaos out here. I don't think I've ever seen 26th Street like this before in my entire life.
It was already chaos by the time that many of us were coming in. Many were getting calls like, hey, don't come in, like don't bother even like trying to park in the back or anything like that. Everything's going down. There was videos, photos being sent. One of the main things in particular was one of the security guards that were for the mall was taken into custody, and we didn't really know like what was happening, what was going on.
With With COVID, I think sales were down 50%. With immigration and everything that happened, they were down 60 to 70%. It was horrific. We thought COVID was bad, but COVID didn't even touch the surface of what everything was going on here. Little Village is known for having a lot of street vendors, you know, people selling fruit, people selling, you know, things in our culture like atole, champurrado, which is like a hot chocolate, all of that stuff. And you didn't see anyone off the streets. The streets were absolutely dead. And like I said, 26th Street has a lot of foot traffic. Rain, shine, cold, blizzards, no blizzards, has a lot of foot traffic, and there was like not one single soul walking these streets.
You're looking at a complete different mall. If you go around, you'll notice that there's about 15 or 20 empty slots. So in 2024, or maybe even the start of 2025, you're looking at a full mall that was almost having people sign up to see whenever there was a slot open. You know, you're looking at every weekend being packed, every week being packed. Right now, or I guess during, you saw that completely shift. It's honestly just a lot of uncertainty and chaos that has been spread among everyone here.
They wanted you to see them and be like in fear. They just wanted you to be scared.
We'll now turn to how the directive to militarize our streets played out in Lakeview. Throughout our investigations, the Commission has uncovered evidence of rampant racial profiling. Again, a policy explicitly endorsed by the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and stops that escalated to violence by federal agents. One example of such racial profiling occurred in the Lakeview neighborhood in October 24th, 2025. That morning, federal agents started their day patrolling a Home Depot parking lot, randomly stopping people who were sitting in their cars. They proceeded to drive around the Lakeview neighborhood, stopping people working outside or just crossing the street and questioning them about their citizenship. This patrol culminated when the federal agents turned the wrong way down a one-way street to approach a house in a residential neighborhood, leading to chaos in Lakeview. Masked agents arrested a man working in the neighborhood. Then they unleashed tear gas on neighbors who gathered to protest. You'll now see a video laying out these offenses, much of which includes footage from the agents' own body cameras. Much of this footage has not been released to the public, and these are residents that have bravely come forward to speak out about the incident for the first time. As a reminder, the video contains graphic.
My neighborhood is very family-oriented.
Lakeview is so vibrant. It's close to the lake, of course. It's filled with a wonderful community, wonderful people.
It's a very nice part of Chicago that's family-friendly. There's not a lot of crime. You're near good schools, you're near parks.
United States, sir? Of course I am. All right, where are you born? Here? You live here. Hey, you said I missed one. What's your name? What country are you a citizen of? I'm sorry? What country are you a citizen of? What kind of citizen? What country are you a citizen of? U.S. citizen. Okay, cool, man. You're a U.S. citizen, sir? Pardon? You're a U.S. citizen? Yeah.
ICE, get off my property. You are not allowed. This is private property.
You know, I expressly did not give my consent or my permission for these federal agents to be inside my garage.
They were trying to throw him over, and the crowd of people were like, no, 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 don't throw him over. And at that point, I was also saying, you have no permission to be here. This is private property. Like, please leave. And they said we'd leave if you could unlock your gate. So I went down and unlocked
permission to be here. This is private property. And at no point was a warrant shown, or, you know, they didn't really converse with me other than asking me to unlock the gate.
There was a SUV with a gentleman in the back. There were, I want to say, at least 3 to 4 agents. All they had on them was, it just said police. They were wearing tactical gear, fully covered faces. They all had tear gas grenades in their hands.
It's always shocking when you're like, your sense of this only happens on the news. It's really, really disorienting when you walk out your front door and you would literally walk into a scene like the one I did that day.
What are you guys doing?
I mean, it's as chaotic as what you think something like that would be. It's like, you know, something that you see in the movies. I mean, I know that sounds cliche, but it is.
Going for fun. Can I pop a gas? Gas coming down. Gas coming down. Hey, gas! Say gas! Fuck out of here! Gas, here we go! Back up! Back up! Sit!
Around that time is when the gas canisters were used. They exited the same way they could have the whole time. There was nobody blocking them in behind but themselves.
Hey, I got you. Stay there!
At first I thought, well, we all got spared because it blew the wrong direction. But within about 30 seconds, everybody started to react.
I was coughing. I felt my eyes stinging. It was getting harder to breathe.
They tear gassed my entire neighborhood.
I've never experienced tear gas, so I mean, it's very acrid. My nose felt burnt.
I started to get what almost looked like a sunburn down the bottom of my face, and my skin felt really sweaty. Like if you're really sick and have the flu and your skin just kind of feels off, it was like that, where my skin just felt really irritated. I was super nauseous, and I ended up throwing up a ton that evening and probably should have gone to the hospital.
People on the street are screaming. There's whistles being blown still at this point. People are still very frantically reacting, and so it's a lot of chaos that you're taking in. How do you protect yourself when the government has come to your neighborhood and decided to draw guns and drop tear gas? I don't know. I think there are things happening here that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. It reminds you of things that you would read in your history books of what they would come into neighborhoods back, during the 1940s and do to people.
I was scared seeing masked agents disappearing people off the streets. It was surreal.
Stay back!
It's maybe one of the key things that you hear growing up that is what makes America different, is that people don't disappear off the streets without due process.
I gave you plenty of warning.
It was a horrifying moment.
Go, go, go. Later, beautiful.
I note that the commission interviewed people of color and immigrants in Lakeview. They were afraid of retaliation and understandably did not want to provide testimony. We're grateful that their neighbors are willing to share what happened today. We'll now hear from Marissa Vivoda, a tenant in the building where the arrests occurred.
Good afternoon. My name's Marissa Vivoda. Thank you for allowing me to address the commission. I'm a tenant at the property you just saw raided in that video. I've lived in Lakeview for 6 years and at that property for just under 2 years. October 24th, 2025 started like any normal Friday. It was a beautiful fall day just before Halloween. I work in marketing and was working from home that day. For several weeks before, my landlord, Leo Feller, was having work done around the property, including replacing some siding on the front and sides of the building and some remodeling of Leo's unit, which is above mine. I'd come to know the construction workers, all of whom were very kind to me while they were working on the house. The video shows that the federal agents caused chaos that day, and I'd like to explain the impact. One of the workers who was arrested was hurt. He came into the house and was bloody, dripping blood throughout the building. I and other neighbors tried to help him and another worker get cleaned up and coordinate their ride home. My landlord helped them access legal support, and several neighbors contributed. The neighborhood came together to help them. While the impact on them was enormous, I was scared too. This was especially traumatic for me because in 2021, some friends and I were robbed at gunpoint in a very similar manner. People jumping out of cars in masks and threatening us with guns. At that time, I called 911 for help, but this time, when it happened at my home, I couldn't call 911 because the people responsible were law enforcement agents themselves. That day fundamentally changed my relationship with the government and law enforcement, and it's left me feeling anxious every day since. After the incident that day, I was so shaken I stayed at my mom's house in the suburbs for a while because it was difficult to be at my apartment and not think of everything that had happened there. Having my space violated by people I'm supposed to trust is deeply unsettling, and although I'm very nervous and anxious still, I chose to tell my story because I want to make sure there's accountability for what those agents did that day, and I hope it never happens again. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you, Marissa. We'll now hear from Natalia Connolly, a community member who lived in the Lakeview neighborhood during the raid and witnessed it.
Thank you. My name is Natalia Connolly. I've lived in Chicago for 4 years with my husband and my daughter. Up until last fall, I lived in Lakeview, not far from where Marissa lives in the scene that you saw unfold in the video. I want to thank the Commission for inviting me to speak here today and for the opportunity to speak about the injustice done to our community. On the morning of October 24, 2025, I drove my 4-year-old daughter to her preschool near our home. Soon after drop-off, I received an email from the school principal alerting parents that ICE was present in the neighborhood. The preschool would be instituting a lockdown. I had already felt anxiety, dread, and horror about ICE's campaign in Chicago. My family was not the target of ICE's violence, as my friends and neighbors were. But that didn't change the weight on my conscience, nor my conviction that a great injustice was being done in our city to immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, to those already vulnerable to prejudice and racism, and to our collective safety. Now, at the news of a preschool lockdown, the terror swallowed me whole. Later that morning, after leaving the preschool, I witnessed the arrest on Lakewood Avenue. I saw for myself the masked agents. I watched them throw tear gas unprovoked on those of us standing nearby. I saw their hands flinch on their weapons, threatening us for simply holding our phones. As they drove away, I saw the shadow of my neighbor, a terrified Chicagoan, in the backseat of their car. Later, when I picked up my daughter from school, ICE agents still lurked nearby. Helicopters hovered overhead. Whistles blared in the distance. I was vigilant and horror-stricken. At any moment, ICE could thunder up to our curb and shatter our school community, throwing someone to the ground as they'd done that morning only blocks away. And now I knew firsthand what it would be like. What if those agents showed up here at our school pickup? Our children who were waiting to see their loved ones, who spent the day learning their alphabet and making paper crowns, what might they witness? I could hardly make sense of the things I'd seen. How was a preschooler to make sense of the insensible? Like every other mother in Chicago, I shook with the conviction that no child should have to endure the terror and violence of masked agents jumping out of cars and taking people. No child should have to live in fear that their parent, teacher, caregiver, or neighbor could at any moment be rounded up and driven away to an untold location. What would it do? What has it done to our children's sense of safety and security? What about their right to live free of fear and violence? What about their innocence, their joy, their dignity? I was overwhelmed and in despair about what was being done to children throughout Chicago who were enduring the terror of masked agents, abductions, and raids, the trauma of separation from their loved ones or sudden displacement from their homes. On that day, I made a plan to protect my daughter in a small way from the brutality she could at any point witness during ICE's occupation in Chicago. She was curious about the whistle I carried with me. Whistles are our community's way of communicating with each other. Whistles signal loudly that ICE is nearby and neighbors should make themselves safe. We knew that citizenship and official documents couldn't protect anyone from an unwarranted arrest. Whistles, then, were our only shields. My daughter knew that the whistle helped keep our neighbors safe. I decided to teach her a game that might keep her safe, too. The game was this: if she heard whistles blowing nearby, she should grab my hand or the hand of the adult she was with, close her eyes, and in her heart hum a phrase that we sing around our home, which is, "No hate, no fear, immigrants are welcome here." I told her to repeat that in her heart until she heard that she could open her eyes. This game was my way of preserving my daughter's sense of safety and security in the world, of trying to prevent state-sanctioned violence from lodging itself in her mind and worldview. I wish I could have prevented it for every child in Chicago. I think often of the mothers and fathers who had no choice, who were just as desperate to protect their children from this trauma, but could not. I weep with every mother whose child has seen what they cannot understand and has endured what they are incapable of processing. I weep for the harm that will take lifetimes to heal. I can only hope that when the day comes to share with my daughter the unfettered truth, we can thank God that justice was served, that all those responsible for ICE's brutality, from those who gave the orders to those who carried them out, were held accountable for their harms, that their demoralization and indiscriminate arrests, their chaos and violence have been recorded, righted, and put to rest. And above all, I hope that Chicago can be a place where all children are safe to grow up without fear of violence, capture, and separation from their loved ones, including and especially at the hands of our government. Until then, I will keep encouraging my daughter to hum that phrase in her heart, that immigrants are welcome here. Long after the whistles fade, may she and all our children believe and bear witness to that truth that carried us through. Immigrants are welcome here. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia and Marissa, very much. This is an incident that never should have happened. The evidence in the case is clear. Federal agents caused chaos in the Lakeview community when they recklessly invaded a home and threw tear gas on concerned citizens. They tear gassed an entire neighborhood to arrest one man with no criminal record. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our witnesses for sharing your heartfelt stories. The evidence from the Little Village and Lakeview investigations demonstrates a clear, coordinated effort to militarize our streets, to target people through racial profiling, and to sow chaos and fear. It was conceived by the very top of the Trump administration and carried out by the officers of Operation Midway Blitz. We'll now take a brief 15-minute intermission.
everybody. We're going to get started in about 3 minutes, so if folks can please find their seats, that would be great.
All right, welcome back. We'll now resume today's hearing. An essential feature in any democracy is the ability for citizens to use their voices, organize, and protest against government abuse and oppression. There is good reason why the protection of such speech and assembly is the First Amendment. But throughout Operation Midway Blitz, the Trump administration went to extreme lengths to stifle the ability of citizens to use their voices to protect one another and push back against tyranny. Commission Counsel Ginger Hancock will walk through the Trump administration's second policy directive, their deliberate strategies to suppress lawful protest and silence protected speech.
One of the first lines of defense to Operation Midway Blitz took the form of community members who observed and recorded the federal agents. Everyday people followed CBP and ICE. They spoke out and they recorded the agents' activities. They also served as a collective witness to the violence our government was perpetrating on its own people. Donald Trump and Stephen Miller have labeled those who oppose their agenda as violent radicals or terrorists. Under the current administration, there's no room for dissent. On the ground here in Chicago, Kristi Noem and Gregory Bovino were the enforcers of the administration's undemocratic anti-protest policy. Footage of an influencer who is embedded with CBP shows Noem and Bovino briefing federal agents on the ground about how to deal with protesters outside the Broadview Detention Center. In the briefing, Noem and Bovino are telling agents to arrest people who oppose the Trump administration's agenda.
Today when we leave here, we're going to go hard. We're going to hammer these guys.
All right, folks, we heard it. It's roll-up time here. All right, state instruments of hard power, you're going to be put into full effect. So what's going to happen is when we do decide to roll out, I'll lead the way up front. That crowd there is an unsafe crowd on either side. We're gonna roll them all the way out of here. And when they resist, what happens? They get arrested. So it's now going to be a free arrest zone.
During that same briefing, Noem told her agents to go hard against anyone who is, quote, advocating for violence against the American people. Noem didn't really explain what she meant when she talked about violence against the American people. But she did explain what specific actions in the Trump administration's view deserve punishment. Noem said people need to face consequences based on how they're speaking, who they are affiliated with, who they're funded by, and by what they're talking about as far as consequences for what we're doing. These are forms of constitutionally protected free speech. Judge Sarah Ellis of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois looked at the same briefing you just saw. Judge Ellis concluded that what Noem was really saying was, the more people protest, the harder the government will come after them. It's what Bovino called the state's hard power. Bovino, for his part, took every opportunity to share this message with the people of Chicago. Here's a video of Bovino answering questions during a local TV news interview.
You think use of force here at Broadview has been exemplary?
I do.
Firing from elevation is within DHS policy?
It doesn't matter where you fire from. An elevation is not a violation of policy. That is a less lethal device for area saturation. Absolutely.
Aiming above the waist is within policy?
It can be. If someone strays into a pepper ball, then that's on them. Don't protest and don't trespass.
Here's what you just heard, quote, if someone strays into a pepper ball, then that's on them. Those are chilling words to hear coming out of the mouth of a high-ranking law enforcement official. So how did this policy play out on the ground? The commission examined two examples that occurred in late October in Old Irving Park and in Evanston. First, Old Irving Park. People moved to Old Irving Park to raise a family if they didn't grow up there themselves. I'm going to show you a video of events that occurred on the morning of Saturday, October 25. That was also the morning of the annual Old Irving Park Halloween parade. The video is hard to watch. The residents of Old Irving Park were thrust into a war zone while they were in their pajamas. With no notice, they were put in the position of having to confront heavily armed and masked men with long guns and tear gas. The neighbors you'll see in this video were angry. They were scared. They also engaged in direct and sometimes hostile verbal confrontation with federal agents. Before you judge the residents of Old Irving Park, ask yourselves what you would do and how you would react if this was your home and your neighborhood. And when you look at the force that was used by federal agents, ask yourselves who was really in danger. Was it the man in his bathrobe, the jogger returning from a run, or the agents in fatigues with long guns and tear gas?
Stop. Andy. Doors. Manos atrás. You got cuffs. Come on, man. Cuffs. Come on, man. Come on, man. Okay. Why the fuck you pushing like that? Why you pushing like that? What the fuck's wrong with you, bro? The fuck's wrong with you? Stay in the vehicle for now. Okay. Let's go. Yeah. Put them on messing up. Yeah. You should go to fire. Oh shit! How do you think this is gonna work? No one's threatening you. We don't have weapons. No one's got weapons. No one. You guys are gonna get gas. You guys are gonna get blame yourself to Judge Ellis on Tuesday, motherfucker. You guys are gonna get gas. Move out of the way. You guys are gonna get gas. Hey, do not touch her. I'm telling you. Do not touch her. Get out of the way. Do not touch her. Back up. Back up. You guys are gonna get gas.
Understand you guys are scaring our kids.
You get out of here if you guys get out of our way.
No, you shouldn't even be here.
You see us trying to leave? Oh my God. Wow, are you okay? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Go. Hey, my fucking truck. You guys gonna pay for this shit?
Brian!
Back your vehicle!
Driving down the phone!
Back your vehicle! Back your vehicle! Fucking pussy! Back your vehicle up! Back your vehicle up! Fuck you! Back your vehicle up! Back your vehicle up! Back up! No. I'll tell you hit him. You hit him. I'll tell you hit him. It's a woman. She's not resisting.
Easy on him. He's 70 years old. He's 70 years old.
Yes.
Tear gas at Old Irving Park right now. Our own neighborhood, scaring our children. Unbelievable. Never thought this would happen in my neighborhood.
Here Here's what Gregory Bovino said about what happened in Old Irving Park when he was questioned under oath in a federal deposition. He said that based on his review of his agent's written reports, what happened was, quote, a more than exemplary use of force by our agents to keep themselves safe from assault of subjects and, quote, violent rioters. You're going to hear directly now from someone who witnessed all of this firsthand and who lives in Old Irving Park. His name is Brian Culp. Good afternoon, Brian. Could you please introduce yourself to the commissioners?
Yes, my name is Brian Culp, and I am a lifelong resident of the city of Chicago.
Brian, can you tell us about your family a little bit?
Sure. My wife and I are both from the Beverly neighborhood. That's where we grew up. We both went to Catholic school on the south side. My dad is a Chicago firefighter, and that's why I have been a Chicago resident my whole life. And my wife and I moved from the south side to Old Irving Park, as you said, to raise our family, and we are lucky to have two beautiful, bright boys, both an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, who fortunately were not there to see any of this that day.
So people often say Chicago is a city of neighborhoods. What's your neighborhood like?
You know, because my wife and I grew up in Beverly, which is an amazing neighborhood to raise families, we wanted to have the same for our kids, and we found Old Irving Park kind of by luck, by going to a local barbecue place in the neighborhood for the first time a few years ago called Smoke, and that drew us into the neighborhood, and then kind of the rest is history.
Brian, do you and your wife and your two boys live on the street that we just saw in that video?
The gentleman that ICE abducted, they took him to the ground on my front yard.
And you're shown in that video as well, right?
That's me walking around with Blackhawks pajama pants, yes.
Okay. And can you tell the commission how you came to be walking around in your front yard wearing Blackhawk pajama pants on a Saturday morning?
I was sitting on my couch watching the NBC5 clip of the latest proceedings in front of Judge Ellis, who I have appeared in front of as an attorney on multiple occasions. So I was very interested in following the developments in that case. And as I was just having my morning coffee, as I'm one to do on Saturday morning, I saw a scuffle out my front window, and what you saw play out on that camera is what I observed when I opened my front door.
Can you estimate about how many federal agents may have been on your street that day?
I mean, there had to have been at least a dozen.
And can you describe what they were wearing?
As you saw in the video, I mean, they were wearing full military fatigues, and they were carrying weapons of war. They had long guns, they had chemical munitions, they had gas masks. I mean, they were dressed as though they were ready to go to war. And I think I frequently asked them if that's what they were preparing to do, was to go to war against the citizens of my neighborhood.
And what was going through your mind as you saw these heavily armed, masked agents, as you said, in fatigues on your front lawn on the block where you live with your family?
Complete and utter disbelief. I became an attorney because I believe in the rule of law. And I started my career defending Chicago police officers in civil rights cases in federal court. I grew up with Chicago police officers. Half my friends, when I was growing up, their parents were police officers. So watching the government, the federal government, openly and flagrantly violate people's civil rights, my neighbors, ordinary citizens of Chicago, as I've said many times before, these weren't paid protesters, these weren't activists, these were people who witnessed lawless agents acting in violent ways and came out of their homes to stand up for their community.
Can you describe the way the federal agents were acting towards you and your neighbors once you came out of your homes?
I mean, it was the definition of excessive force. No one had weapons. No one was threatening them in any physical way. We were obviously as we are allowed to do under the First Amendment, expressing our extreme displeasure with their conduct and the way that they were comporting themselves that day. But we were all restrained otherwise in terms of how we were interacting with them, and yet at every opportunity they dialed up the brutality, the terror, and it was clear that they were doing it just to inflict pain and terror, and the cruelty was the point.
Brian, in the video, we saw footage of an older man who got out of his car and was eventually pinned to the ground. At one point on the video, he says something like, "Just let me go." Do you know that man?
I do. He's my next door neighbor.
Okay. And what's your understanding of what happened to your next door neighbor that day?
I mean, it's hard to put in a nutshell, but he sustained several broken ribs, internal bleeding. I think he had been diagnosed with potentially a mild concussion. So too was the female cyclist who you observed. I believe it was told to me that she also sustained several broken ribs. One of my other neighbors who was wearing a duck costume because the neighborhood Halloween parade was supposed to start about 30 minutes after they terrorized our block, so there were families all over the area in costume. They took my neighbor who was in a duck costume to the ground, and I believe he sustained a mild concussion. And specifically my next door neighbor who was injured, I mean, it impacted his life. I believe he was supposed to run the New York Marathon a few weeks later and was obviously not able to do that.
And at the risk of asking an obvious question, do you know why your neighbor was driving on his own street that morning?
Yeah, he was, as I said, he was preparing to run the New York City Marathon and was coming home from what was supposed to be, I think, one of his last long runs before the marathon.
Brian, you've worked in law enforcement as well, right?
Yes, I'm a former prosecutor, in addition to having defended Chicago police officers for the city.
Okay, and when you think back to the events of October 25th, what stands out in your mind when you think back to what was happening to you and to your neighbors that day?
It's the exact opposite of what law enforcement is supposed to do. You know, on the side of a Chicago squad car, I believe it says something to the effect of "to serve and protect," and that is the opposite of what those agents did. And there's no better illustration of this than after the chaos had finally subsided, at some point someone called 911. And my beat officer responded. And it just so happened to be that she actually knew the family of the gentleman that they abducted. And she was, describing him to me and describing his family to me to say that they were hardworking. He was married, father of two. So, coming out and seeing these agents act in that way, to then be reminded of why I went into the career that I went into after interacting with that police officer, it was a study in contrast, to say the least.
Brian, the video that we just saw is hard to watch. It's hard to go back in time and talk about everything that happened. So why are you here testifying today?
Because again, like I said, I became an attorney because I believe in the rule of law. I believe in accountability, and I believe in doing the right thing. And as hard as it is for me, as upsetting as it is for me, as upsetting as it has been for me since this happened, I feel an obligation to come forward and provide this testimony just like I did that day. I acted that day out of instinct. I wasn't thinking for my own well-being. I wasn't filtering my language for a setting like this later down the road. I was, responding to violent government agents terrorizing my block. And because so many of my neighbors, for their own reasons, are not comfortable to do it themselves, I felt an even greater obligation and an even greater responsibility to stand up and speak for the city that I've called home since I was a child.
Brian, what do you hope will be done with the information that you're sharing with the commission?
At a minimum, I hope it raises public awareness as to what happened. It's still interesting to me that there are folks who don't know about these abuses, who didn't see what happened during Midway Blitz or even what happened in Minneapolis. So at a sheer minimum, you know, my hope is that folks will understand that this could happen to any community, to any neighborhood, to anyone in this country at any time the Trump administration deems that they want to inflict that kind of pain and terror on communities like mine. And I hope that one day there is some form of real accountability for the people that perpetrated this violence on my block and that perpetrated this violence throughout Chicago and Minneapolis and other cities, because they deserve to be held accountable for what they did.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing your experience and your community's experience with the commission today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to discuss next how this policy played out in Evanston, and I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Julia Gegenheimer.
This commission just examined what happened when federal agents barreled into Old Irving Park as kids lined up for a Halloween parade at their school. That happened on October 25th. It rocked the community. What should have been a joyous occasion featuring adorable kids in costumes trick-or-treating exploded into chaos and violence. That feeling of fear and uncertainty proliferated across the city. A few days later, Governor Pritzker requested that DHS suspend immigration enforcement operations in Illinois over the Halloween weekend.
No child in America should have to go trick-or-treating in fear that they might be confronted with armed federal agents and have to inhale tear gas. I honestly can't even believe that I have to make this plea.
No, we're absolutely not willing to put on pause any work that we will do to keep communities safe. The fact that Governor Pritzker is asking for that is shameful, and I think unfortunate that he doesn't recognize how important the work is that we do to make sure we're bringing criminals to justice and getting them off our streets.
What you just heard on that video is a federal official directly denying the request of a sitting governor to stop abusing his constituents, to stop harassing children on Halloween. Our next investigation shows what it means to the Trump administration to, quote, keep children safe. As a warning, this video does contain images of violence.
Get your hands off of him! This is a neighborhood. There are children right there! There are kids! There are kindergartners in that classroom right there! An accident was caused. They're attacking a person!
I was just driving along and I heard a vehicle, you know, going, you could just tell, it's going too fast for that intersection. What I see is the car speeding and then stop. And it was just a classic brake check move, but more extreme than I've ever seen. I did read the Department of Homeland Security report or whatever, the comment right after saying that they were attempting to make a U-turn, but that is absolutely false. Masked guys jump out of the car, tactical gear, and forcefully then start to pull people out and put them on the ground violently.
Do you have papers? My name is Andy Bonanza. I'm a United States citizen.
It just seemed like a moment of just pure injustice because they caused the accident in the first place.
Why the fuck did you hit her? Get on the fucking road!
kid who was down on the ground getting punched repeatedly. He and whoever he was with, another young man, ran up to the scene, and I think that's all they did.
It never felt like there was an operation being conducted. It felt like mayhem and chaos. There was no chain of command. They were all yelling at each other. Nobody seemed to know what was going on. Guns were pulled. No one, as far as I observed, ever struck an agent or was interfering physically with whatever they were trying to do.
A victim from that day, Jennifer Moriarty, is here today to recount her hours-long victimization at the hands of Border Patrol agents Timothy Donahue and Thomas Parsons. And what will become painfully clear from her testimony is that what Ms. Moriarty experienced had nothing to do with immigration enforcement. It was retaliation, and it was designed to silence an entire community. With the Commission's permission, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Ahmed Bassett.
Good afternoon, Ms. Moriarty.
Hello.
Thank you for being with us here today. Do you need a moment?
No, I'm okay.
Are you a resident of Evanston?
I am. I've been there for a few years, but I've been active, and for over a decade, I coached Little League Baseball for my son for about 10 years.
How old is your son?
He's 17 now.
Do you have any other children?
No, just the one.
Besides being home to Northwestern University, what can you tell us about Evanston and raising a family there?
It's a wonderful community. It's a very mixed community. It's single family, but there's people from everywhere because we do have the university. And it's very open and welcoming. It's a wonderful place. We call it Evanston.
Well, I want to focus on a day that it was not heavenly. On October 31st, 2025, Halloween, that morning, now, you're a lawyer by occupation, is that right?
Yes, I'm a trial lawyer.
And that morning you were doing some prep, is that right?
I was working from home. Yes, I was working from home, and the sounds became just outrageous. There were helicopters, multiple helicopters, and they were getting louder and louder and constant. I took a break because I couldn't focus, so I thought I'd go to the dry cleaner right down the road and forgot my dry cleaning because I was so wigged out. But on the way back, which I live right there at just a couple houses from Oakton and Asbury, and on the way back, it happened. They caused an accident. There were already people out because it was Halloween, and the kids, it was a beautiful day, and there are 3 schools right there. 3 schools in a 3-block range, 2 elementary schools, and a middle school. There's also, right on the corner where this happened, is a community center, which is geared to pre-K children. So there are always people around, but that day there were lots of people out for Halloween, preparing for their kids' school activities.
Was it a school day?
It was a Friday.
And you'd mentioned hearing helicopters. Is that a noise that you were familiar with at that point?
No, not like that. It was as if they were on my home, because a Home Depot is a quarter of a mile away from there.
And what happened at the Home Depot?
From what I learned later, Bovino was there that morning giving some sort of press conference, so I guess gearing things up, ginning up what was going to happen, I suppose.
You get to the scene, it's about 12:15. What draws your attention there?
I was at the stoplight at Oakton and Asbury. I was going to turn left, and a car went through really fast. They had a red light and they slammed on their brakes and caused another car to slam into the back of them.
Did you, in the video that we watched, there was an individual by the name of Dan Abuabsi who described the crash as a brake check. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Would you agree with what he said in this video?
100%.
As far as how the crash was caused?
100%, 100%.
And after witnessing this crash, did you come closer to the scene?
I got out of my car. I always have my purse around my neck like this, and I had my cell phone, and I walked around to the side of the driver's side, and they had this young woman on the ground, and I had my cell phone out, and I was going to start recording, and one of the agents that were right there immediately turned around, grabbed me by the neck, and threw me back on the ground and got on top of me. Proceeded to try and handcuff me. I wasn't resisting. I was yelling at him like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he was clearly struggling, as if he had no clue what he was doing.
In the video that we watched, were you the person on the ground with, I believe, striped socks?
Yeah, I call them my prison socks. Unfortunately, I picked the wrong day to wear those.
What was going through your head as this agent was on top of you trying to arrest you?
I was angry. I was so angry. I was livid. I wasn't afraid of them because I didn't do anything wrong. I'm a white woman, and there was nothing happening. So I wasn't afraid. I was angry that they were doing this in my community at the time at Halloween, causing this.
About how many agents were on the scene when you arrived?
There were different types of agents. The agents that were that I ended up with were Border Patrol. There were other groups of agents that were wearing like camouflage outfits. I have no idea where they came from, but at one point it appeared that at least there had to be close to a dozen agents around there.
At some point, were you handcuffed and placed in the federal SUV?
Yes, I was handcuffed, and they cuffed me in the front with my hands in the front. They originally put the young lady in first. They put me in and seatbelted me, but as the chaos, when you saw him pull his gun to say that he was going to shoot someone, the young woman was able to get out. They were unskilled. She was able to open the door in the back of this SUV with her handcuffs behind her back and get out. That's when that redheaded guy, the driver, ran around, shoved her back in, and pulled his gun and pointed into the face of a man with a bike helmet and another woman that were standing right there on the grass yelling, and he said he was going to shoot them.
What was going through your head as this was all unfolding before you?
Trying to process it was insane, because like, this is not real. This can't be real. And as that's happening outside the door, they put me on the passenger side, outside the door, they're beating that young man. And he's screaming. He is absolutely screaming. They pick him up and try to put him in the car, but I'm seatbelted. So they unhooked me, shoved me over. So the young woman's on the right-hand side, she's belted. Then me, the young man, and then another agent. Before we pulled away from that scene, another agent got in the back with us. So there were 4 of us in the back seat.
And there were two agents up front, the driver, the redheaded guy, and the other man who you referred to as Parsons. I refer to him as the communicator because he was communicating with somebody on his phone about where to go, places to meet.
And at some point, did you learn that the driver of this vehicle, the person you said had red hair, did you learn that his name was Timothy Donahue?
I did. I learned that. I learned that later because he gave his driver's license to the Evanston police at one point.
Now, while on scene, at any point, did you see any of the bystanders attacking or creating any sort of threat to the agents?
No. The people on the scene had whistles and cell phones and their voices, and that's it.
At some point, you do leave the scene, is that right?
The Evanston police actually cleared a path for them to leave, to pull away from the scene, yes.
And when you left, did you get a sense that the agents knew where they were going?
I had no idea where they were going, none.
And at some point, though, do you learn that they're trying to meet up with Evanston police?
The communicator was on the phone, and he was trying to coordinate a meeting location for them to make a police report about the motor vehicle accident that they just created.
What would you describe, or how would you describe the demeanor of the two other bystanders in the car with you?
The young lady was very quiet. She had nothing. She had no shoes. She had nothing. They just pulled her out of the car. The young man was begging for medical attention. And throughout the ordeal, he was going through a roller coaster of emotions, anxiety, panic attacks, and repeatedly asking for help. I said he needed help, and they refused any medical attention for him, and he was hurt. He had a visible mark on the side of his head that was huge.
At some point, does the person in the jacket, in the green jacket, is he requesting help from the agents throughout this car ride?
Yes. He asked for medical attention. We drove around for a while. We drove in different directions, and when we left the scene, we were heading north. We ended up at some point on the far end of Evanston where we know there's a hospital, and he said, "There's a hospital right here, just take me there."
And he just refused?
They didn't even respond half the time.
Did any of the agents ever examine or try to help the person in the green jacket at any point?
No, they did nothing.
In fact, at one point, doesn't one of the agents, Agent Donahue, tell the person in the green jacket that he's being too emotional?
He does. He told him he was being too emotional just to breathe.
Now, at some point, does Agent Donahue turn around and threaten you?
Multiple times while we were in the car. Agent Donahue pointed his mace in my face and told me he was going to mace me. And I told him he'd be a fool because we're all in this together. And it wasn't just me. While we drove around, he tried to create other accidents with us in the car.
How did he do that?
As we were driving between Evanston and the city to meet people, people would blow whistles, and so somebody would, the community would be alerted, and so a car might be coming behind him, so he would slam on his brakes, try and get them to hit our car with all of us in there. And then he would jump out of the driver's seat and run back with his mace in his hand as if he was going to mace those drivers. And he did that. He got out of the car twice. He did it twice. The third time that he did a brake check on somebody, the communicator told him, maybe this time you shouldn't get out.
And you used the term brake check. In using it, are you using it in the same way that we heard Mr. Abu Abzi describe it?
That's exactly it. He would speed up and then slam on his brakes.
Now, at some point, do you end up meeting up with an Evanston police officer?
We did. We ended up back on McCormick and Dempster and met
with some police officers, from Evanston police officers there.
About how long had you been driving until you ended up meeting with the Evanston police officers?
I'd say it had to be like an hour and a half at least.
And throughout that time, the person in the green jacket who had been beaten unseen, he had been requesting repeatedly medical attention?
Repeatedly, and his breathing was very erratic. At one point, he felt like he was going to be sick. He was overheating. He was having a lot of problems.
And while you're at this scene with the police officer from Evanston, does Mr. Marcello ever ask the Evanston officer for help?
Yes, he does. The back window was open, and he yelled out the back window that he needed medical attention.
I would like to show you a video of this interaction right now.
Ask him if that fucking punch in his head was pretend. Drop it.
Fighting you back.
Listen, because you got dropped like a little girl.
Well, I'll ask you a different question, actually. In relation to that video, was that Agent Donahue in the driver's seat? Is that a yes?
That's a yes. He was admitting that he punched the young man.
And in fact, he says, ask him if the punch to his head was pretend. Those are his words, right?
Those were his words.
And you say he wasn't even fighting back, correct?
Correct.
And his response is, yeah, because he got dropped like a little girl.
They had multiple people attacking that young man at the same time.
Now, when you do get to the Evanston Police Department, or you meet up with Evanston Police, you describe that interaction with the person in the green jacket and the police officer, is that right?
Yes.
I would like to show you a video of this interaction right now.
Yes, sir.
I feel like I need medical attention. Like I'm a paramedic. My face.
Fine. I'm sorry. What were you saying? I'm a paramedic. He's fine. Okay. My partner got your info? Yeah. Okay.
In that video clip, the person standing outside of the SUV is the Evanston police officer, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And Agent Donahue says, I'm a medic, he's fine.
He said, I'm a paramedic. Yeah.
And at no point had he even examined the man in the green jacket, is that right?
No.
Now, at some point during this drive, does Agent Donahue actually use a knife on you?
He does.
How does that happen?
They didn't take anything from us, but I always have like a shoulder strap purse. I had a very similar one. This is the one that I was wearing on that day, and he sliced it in one swoop.
And if you could just hold it up a bit, what you're showing is your bag, and it's cut as if
He pulled it from my neck, he pulled it out, and he took a knife and he sliced it right across and sliced it right off my neck.
Was that just with one slice?
One slice.
Now, at some point, are you taken to an FBI building?
Yeah, eventually they transferred me into a different car because I was not seat belted. And we all ended up at the FBI facility off of Roosevelt.
And at some point you're released, is that right?
Yes, we were all released.
And how many shoes were you wearing when you were released? I know this is a funny question, but.
I was wearing one, because when the agent had me on the ground and trying to handcuff me, one of my shoes came off. And as he picked me up to put me in the car, it was right there, and I said, can I just put that on? And he picked it up and he threw it. For the cruelty, just for the cruelty.
And I think you actually told me that none of the 3 bystanders who were arrested were wearing shoes in that car.
The young lady didn't have any on, and the young man lost one as well.
And to your knowledge, are all 3 of you U.S. citizens?
We are all U.S. citizens, yes.
Now, while you were at the FBI building, were you ever told why you were arrested?
I wasn't arrested.
Is that what they told
you? I was never, they didn't even ask my name. They never asked even our names. The first time that they got my name was at the FBI facility when they started to go through my purse while I was waiting in the garage of the FBI.
Did you ask them why you were being detained?
The agents didn't answer. 2 FBI agents told me that I was being detained by Border Patrol without reason. They gave me no reason. There was no arrest, there was no processing, there was no paperwork, there was nothing.
And there were no charges?
There were never any charges.
And to this day, CBP has never given you a reason for why you were detained?
No.
And for how long were you detained that day?
The whole ordeal was about a little over 5 hours.
Now, in the aftermath of that, did you lose anything?
I did. I received an email from the government on Monday that said that my global entry status had been revoked without reason.
Now, people have lost a lot from Operation Midway Blitz, and global entry is but one thing, but why do you think that happened? Do you have any sense or understanding?
I was very verbal throughout the ordeal, and when they did finally get my purse and go through it at the FBI facility, they pulled out my attorney ID that allows me access to the courthouse. They got extremely giddy when they found that, and they were saying, we're going to get her fired from her county attorney job. And I very snide, and it said, maybe you should learn to read, at least at a 2nd grade level, because what does it say directly under the word attorney in bold letters? And the agent had to read it out that said, not an employee. So I think they were rather pissed that I had shamed them quite a bit. I was very colorful. A prior witness said I did not use my legal words during the ordeal.
And at some point, one of the cards they take out of your purse is your global entry card, is that right?
Yes, they took pictures of everything that I had in my purse, my credit cards, my driver's license, and everything.
In this incident, you saw the community come to the scene and really stand up for people. Can you tell us how this incident has impacted the community of Evanston?
It's made us stronger. I wasn't engaged in, I didn't have a whistle before this day. I do now. I'm active. I would go to protests, but now I'm very involved. I'm very involved in community outreach. I make sure that certain families that are struggling and are afraid to go to the store, I do grocery shopping. I do things like that. That's what our community does. We step up and we help each other.
And how has this impacted you personally?
It's insane. I too chose this. My grandfather was an appellate court judge for the state of New York. I grew up admiring him as an amazing man, and I wanted to be like him. Law and order, everybody follows the rules. It works out. And that's not what's happening now.
My last question for you is, why did you decide to come testify today?
Because I had to. It's my obligation to do whatever I can to save our democracy and to preserve something for the future for my child and everybody else's child. This is not the world we're supposed to be giving them.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Ms. Moriarty, and for sharing your experience and that of your communities.
Thank you all for doing this.
With that, I will hand it over to Julia.
What happened in Evanston last Halloween was not just about the violence. It is about what happens to a community that dares to watch, to record, and to speak. Every person you saw and heard was exercising a constitutional right, the right to witness, to document, to protest, when federal agents brutally punished them for it. I'll now turn this over to Vice Chair Patricia Brown Holmes.
very touching. Thank you, Ms. Moriarty, Mr. Bissett, Ms. Gegenheimer. We have now seen the evidence of how two clear policy directives administration, the first to militarize our streets and the second to suppress free speech and assembly, played out during Operation Midway Blitz. Lakeview, Little Village, Old Irving Park, Evanston, and all across Chicago, a planned, coordinated campaign of terror. Tomorrow, we'll examine evidence of the third directive, providing immunity for lawlessness, and we'll look ahead to the long-term ramifications of the operation. But before we end our hearing today, we'll hear closing remarks from the chair of this commission, Judge Ruben Castillo.
Thank you, Vice Chair. You can only imagine, both the Vice Chair and I served as judges, how hard it is to have seen everything we've seen this afternoon. I know it's been a hard day for everybody here. I want to, from the bottom of my heart and all the commissioners' hearts, thank all the witnesses who gave courageous and emotional testimony. We are all proud of the peaceful resistance of our Illinois citizens. Yes, they were armed with whistles and cell phones. That's what they had. You know, tomorrow's going to be our last hearing, and I continually have asked for patience. And I can tell you that we could have hundreds of hearings because the evidence that you've seen today, the evidence you're going to see tomorrow, which is even going to be harder, is the tip of the iceberg. And I want to thank the staff, all the attorneys, everyone who's worked at this hearing, because we could go on forever. This evidence is not hard to collect. It's all over the place. There are witnesses all over the city, and every single one of those places that was on that map. There are victims, and there are victims on top of victims, and some of the victims are children. So what you've heard today was not a series of isolated incidents. It's a pattern of extreme abuse and misconduct. Just think that you saw Agent Bonvino label this as exemplary conduct. The videos are just very hard to watch. In Secretary Noem's own words about our governor, they are shameful. And the Evanston residents had it right when they said, shame, 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 as those agents left that city. Across neighborhoods, sustained over time, federal agents used the same tactics over and over again. Roving patrols with no clear purpose, extreme force used when none was necessary, communities treated not as the public, but as a threat. Chicago was treated as a war enemy. Those were the president's own words. Chicago would find out what war looks like. And I want to tell you that less than 2 weeks after that, someone was killed in Franklin Park, Mr. Villegas Gonzalez, and we're going to hear about that tomorrow. All neighborhoods were treated as occupied territory. The consequences were real and in some cases deadly. Families stayed inside, businesses suffered, residents altered their daily lives out of fear and uncertainty. That pattern matters because patterns are not accidents. Patterns are the result of intentional decisions that were encouraged. Agents were allowed to operate with total impunity. And what we've examined today, what happened in Little Village in Evanston and Lakeview, shows how federal enforcement was used not only to carry out operations, but to assert control over public space and disrupt the normal functioning of entire communities. And I want to just pause there for a second when you think about what happened in each of those Chicago neighborhoods, and you saw it on videotape. And again, I say, think about what would have happened if those agents had been disciplined before they went to the city of Minneapolis. And we know what happened there. So this was not confined to individual encounters. It was experience at the neighborhood level, and it's only part of the story, because force alone does not sustain a system like this. It requires official tolerance. It requires supervisory permission or acceptance, and it requires the intentional removal of any disciplinary consequences. That is what we're going to review tomorrow. So tomorrow you will see how this approach resulted in the death of Mr. Villegas Gonzalez and the attempted murder of Ms. Martinez, who will appear here tomorrow afternoon. You will hear how people who protested, observed, or simply asked questions were treated not as participants in our democracy, but as war adversaries. And you will see how shameful federal leadership did not just tolerate that response, but encourage it. You will also see what happens when accountability disappears. When officers are told explicitly or implicitly that the rules do not apply. When officers are told to go hard. When oversight is weakened. When misconduct is denied, defended, and repeated. Because what we are building here is not just a record of what happened, it's an explanation of how it happened and how it was allowed to continue. And by the end of the next hearing, that picture, we hope, will be complete. Not just force, but suppression and impunity, a carefully designed system of oppression designed to encourage people to self-deport and leave. So with that, and with the commission's thanks, I'm going to turn it over to our presiding officer, Vice Chair, Judge Holmes.
Thank you, Judge Castillo. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the presentation of evidence for today, and we'll take a very brief intermission before we entertain public comment. So just about 5 minutes.
Tough to take, yeah.
That's great. If we can take our seats, please, we'll get ready to entertain the public comment.
We were here yesterday.
Okay, let's please take our seats.
7:30.
And we'll get ready for public comment.
About 7:30, and then we just covered the first thing.
Okay, so who's running the public comment? We're just asking if there's anybody. I don't have any names or anything. I don't have a list.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to start with the public comment section. Here's how this portion will work. 2 commenters have been selected through a combination of advanced sign-ups and in-person registration today. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes. A timer will help us remain on schedule so that everyone has an equal opportunity to be heard. We ask speakers to direct their comments to the Commission and to focus on their own experiences, observations, or concerns. Strong emotions are understandable. However, personal attacks or disruptions will not be permitted in this forum. To those who were not selected to speak today, there will be additional hearings in the coming months. Written testimony may be submitted today, and Commission attorneys will be available after the session to speak with individuals who wish to share their stories. This Commission exists to build a full and accurate public record. Your voice matters, whether it was heard earlier today, will be heard now, or is submitted in writing. We will now begin public comment, and I would like to welcome Jose, and followed by Josie.
Good afternoon. My name is Jose, and I'm a lifelong Chicagoan and an educator here in Chicago. And for the last year, I've been safeguarding civil liberties as a constitutional observer, focusing primarily in the Mexican community and with immigrant communities. What I'm going to share to you is not just what I witnessed, a grave abuse of power, but also as a descendant of a family whose contribution to the United States have been shaped by a history of racist enforcement and exploitation. My story as a constitutional observer begins with my grandfather, Nicolas, who entered the U.S. under the Bracero program in 1949. He, along with about 4 million Mexicans, were promised a chance to earn a fair wage in return for feeding a nation recovering from a world war. Yet the reality for him was much harsher. As a prerequisite to enter, my abuelo was sprayed with DDT and subjected to a full-body medical exam when he crossed the border. He was forcibly vaccinated and so he could start working 12-hour days. He mainly worked in the cotton fields in Texas and then moved to the orchards of California and was paid very little beyond wages for his food, housing, and the taxes that were automatically deducted. My abuelo was forcibly removed a few years later when the federal government abruptly ended his contract and launched Operation Wetback, which was a massive deportation effort using anti-Mexican rhetoric to justify deporting people that helped feed those doing the deporting. And then on September 16, 1954, Operation Wetback moved to Chicago with the purpose of deporting Mexicans in the interior of the country. My abuelo was really baffled by this because he knew that he wanted to fulfill his contract and return home, but because he was forcibly removed, he left all of his possessions he had here, and he knew that his labor, along with other Mexicans, were critical in bringing the economy back of this country. The one lesson he taught me when I spoke to him about this was to never trust a gabacho because they cannot take care of anyone but themselves. Decades later, in the 90s, there was a program to try to bring the wages back to those braceros, and my abuelo was not able to reclaim his money and his possessions because he lacked the paperwork. My grandfather was one of millions who could not reclaim those savings, but he kept on to a quiet hope that his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren would one day receive what was taken from him. And that fuels my own resolve to demand justice and become a constitutional observer. For this past year, I was a constitutional observer since the spring. I received training on how to be an observer and was part of my neighborhood watch. In my experience from the spring, when DHS agents were identified in front of a location or a vehicle, we will go out, document their presence, and they will leave without engaging anyone. There was a dramatic difference of how ICE and Customs and Border Patrol agents operated as part of Operation Midway Blitz. On Tuesday, October 21st, at approximately 9 a.m., I received an alert that Customs and Border Protection agents were operating near the Home Depot in my watch area on the northwest side. Following my training, I arrived at the Lincolnwood Home Depot to document, not intervene, those activities, ensuring that my presence would not endanger anyone and just document those activities. That documentation of those activities and the video is in your possession. As soon as I arrived, I witnessed a coordinated ambush in the parking lot. 8 day laborers were working outside the store when 3 SUV vehicles raced in, blocking several cars, and 10 CPD agents descended upon them. Chaos erupted immediately, and I saw 4 workers flee the parking lot and cross McCormick Boulevard heading towards the Chicago River, with 2 agents chasing them. I got out of my car and pursued the agents as soon as I arrived at the bridge overlooking the river on Devon, I heard cries for help. Ayúdenme from the people on the river. There were 3 people in the Chicago River asking for help. I followed the masked agents through the brush in the small streets through the banks of the river, keeping my distance. As soon as they saw me approach, one drew his weapon. Then I started recording the encounter on my phone, hoping that it would protect me. I yelled at them, "Sir, is your body camera on?" The agent put his gun away and said, "Keep your distance," and he warned me not to come any closer. I then pretended to live stream the confrontation, hoping that this tactic would deter him from drawing his weapon again while exposing the agent's actions. I continued to ask the agents to identify themselves, which they refused, and to maintain a safe distance. As the pursuit continued, one of the fleeing workers disappeared in the river, continuing to scream for help. After about 20 minutes, the agents then abandoned the chase. They could not get through the bush and were clearly deterred by the cold water and the strong current of the river. They then called for a car, and they returned to Home Depot, where they detained another man without a warrant as he was returning to his truck after buying construction material. When the agents left, I returned back to the riverbank to look for the people that were there. The water was frigid that day, the current was swift, and I saw no signs of anyone. To this day, I do not know if they came up from the bank. but that uncertainty haunts me, but I'm sure we would have found a body if they did not make it out of the river. I immediately filed a report with ICER's FSN hotline, and I shared the video that I had. Yet, without transparency from the Department of Homeland Security, the fate of the riverbound workers remain unknown. And it's a stark reminder of how incidents disappear in bureaucratic shadows. So this is why I'm glad that we're having this commission today. Unfortunately, those events of the 21st were not isolated, and we see that this trauma is continuing to be perpetrated across communities. So therefore, I just have, one of the questions one of the commissioners asked is, why do I want to present and share the story? I hope that this testimony and those of this commission results in the following: that the state of Illinois could halt all DHS deportations here in Illinois, that there is a state accountability mechanism that we could have subpoena power and bring the agents to justice, that cabinet level officials and agency leaders are accountable, and that we are able to provide restorative justice and reparations financially and otherwise for those workers and people who lost pay, lost earnings in their business, and those that got shot or killed like Marimar Martinez and Silverio Villegas Gonzalez. These policies will not only honor the sacrifices and promises that my grandfather and others have made to their descendants, but it would also strengthen our nation's commitment to just laws and the protection of every human being. At this moment, our humanity faces an assault. Today it falls upon mainly Mexican and Muslim immigrants. But we must never forget that for over 2 centuries, this violence has been endured by African Americans and has also been faced by Japanese Americans. We cannot allow the streets of our barrios to be terrorized by those sworn to uphold the Constitution, and I ask you all, Commission members, to act decisively and to demand a stop to the illegal enforcement that endanger lives so that we can hold them accountable and so we could heal the wounds that have festered for decades. Thank you.
My name is Josie Raymond. I'm a civil litigator by trade, and I'm also a rapid responder on the North Side. I was on the school patrol for McPherson School during Midway Blitz. In January, a group of us started Illinois Fighters Against Fascist Overreach, and our focus since then has been advocating that Chicago Police Department investigate federal agents for violations of Illinois criminal law, and that state's attorneys, including State's Attorney Burke, prosecute these crimes. The Chicago Police Department has failed the city. In response to a FOIA request, CPD told me they have not investigated any alleged criminal conduct by federal immigration agents. No investigations that are closed, no investigations that are open. Superintendent Snelling confirmed this at the April 2nd meeting of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. He said the Chicago Police Department can't investigate federal agents because the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution forbids it. That's not true. The Supremacy Clause merely offers these federal agents a defense, and only so long as they can plead and prove that their actions were authorized by federal law and necessary and proper to satisfy their federal duties. I implore this commission, when it issues its final report, to address and refute these false claims by Superintendent Snelling that the CPD lacks the authority to investigate federal agents for violations of Illinois law. State's Attorney Burke has also failed the city and Cook County. She claims that under the Illinois Supreme Court case of People v. Ringland, her office and its 120 sworn investigators are barred from investigating crimes. This is not true. What Ringland actually said is that, quote, a state's attorney has an affirmative duty to investigate suspected illegal activity when it is not adequately dealt with by other agencies, end quote. Here, CPD admits they are not investigating. That easily qualifies as an inadequate investigation. I implore this commission to set the record straight when it issues its final report, that Ringland mandates that S.A. Burke investigate these crimes in the absence of adequate law enforcement investigations, and also implore this commission to ask that you prosecute these crimes. The state of Illinois needs to advocate that Snelling and Burke stop making excuses and do their job. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. If there are no further public comments, then without objection, we will declare today's session in recess. This hearing will be continued tomorrow at 12 noon in this room. Thank you all very much for your attention today. Thank you.